Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. Yes, why Uncle Ben matters. Now, before I talk about why Uncle Ben matters in the Spider-Man universe, and I think this is very, very important, and of course, this is a direct response to two watered-down MCU Spider-Man movies. Let me just try and explain to you what an MCU shill is. The alias for an MCU shill is Jeremy Conrad, right? So he's a movie pundit. Now, as I look at Jeremy's picture, he's got a T-shirt saying MCU Cosmic. He's a MCU fanboy, and that's great. Good for him. But unfortunately, MCU fanboys don't see the wood for the trees. So the other day he was saying, I just don't understand what people's problems are with the MCU Spider-Man, with Spider-Man Far From Home. And this is what he put down 4 days ago. Someone quote tweeted this, but this is what he had to say. And the MCU has the perfect Peter MJ in Far From Home. Peter isn't crying over her and losing his powers because he's sad. This is the Peter MJ you'll recognise from the comics. Actually, no. And there's many reasons for that, but he's pretty much putting down Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. Of course, an MCU shill would do that. So I'm assuming during his viewing of Spider-Man 2, directed by Sam Raimi, he was smoking some serious fucking weed, right? So, Jeremy, I am going to explain it to you if you ever watch this video, which you probably won't, but I'm going to explain it to all of you. You Raimi haters, right? Sam Raimi created the best 2 Spider-Man movies in history. It's not about the money they made. It's about the content you've got. He's an absolutely fantastic Spider-Man. No one's going to be a better Spider-Man ever than Tobey Maguire. But let's not go into that. First of all, he's not losing his powers just because MJ, he's got a boyfriend, right? The reason he loses his powers is, first off, his best friend hates his guts and believes that he murdered his father. His Aunt May, his true Aunt May, an elderly lady, the way she is in the comics, notice he doesn't mention Aunt May as being exactly like the comics. But anyway, right, let's not go into that. His Aunt May in Spider-Man 2 can't pay her mortgage. She's about to lose her home. He's got a lot on his plate. And of course, he can't commit to MJ. He believes that he's got to be alone after what happened in the first film. There's great emotion and connectivity and character development there. It's brilliant. So it's the culmination of everything that Peter's going through, right? He can barely pay his rent. He can't pay his rent. He loses his job as a pizza delivery guy, right? He's got a lot of problems. And in the end, all these problems get to him and he decides to give up being Spider-Man because Spider-Man's getting in the way. Now, let's go to Spider-Man Far From Home. He literally decides to go on a school trip and not be Spider-Man, right? Let alone, let's not forget, in his previous film, right, Avengers Endgame, he loses his father figure, Tony Stark. Right. Now, we all know that Kevin Feige decided that Uncle Tony is Uncle Ben, right? Tony Stark is this franchise's version of Uncle Ben. They have replaced Uncle Ben. They barely talk about him. Right, I want to draw you a picture. Any Superman fans in the house, right? So I want to imagine, right, if there's a brand new franchise in the DCEU of Superman, and they decide not to mention Jonathan Kent, and to replace him, I don't know, with one of the Justice League, who let's just say Batman, Bruce Wayne, replaces Uncle Ben. How pissed off are you going to be that this legend of DC Comics, who kind of teaches all these kind of Midwestern values, these core morals to Clark when he's growing up, is replaced by Bruce Wayne? You're going to be pretty pissed off, right? And this is exactly what they're doing here. You can't do it. It's wrong. Now, if we go back to Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 1, we've got a fantastic version of Uncle Ben, played by a brilliant actor. It brings tears to my eyes. That's the Uncle Ben from the comics. But no, he's talking about the best Peter and MJ, and he's exactly like the comics. Yes, Tom Holland is age accurate. It's believable that he's going to school. But you know what? Even though I know Tobey Maguire was older at the time, he still convinced me he was a guy going to high school. It was a brilliant performance. The whole thing worked. The romantic element, the superhero element, the obstacles that Peter had in his way. But this Disney shill has decided to just basically, because he's crying, he's not happy, because he can see that this version of Spider-Man isn't very popular. Oh yeah, people are still going to see it. It's making the box office. But there's going to come a time for the MCU where people can see beyond the box office and look at the content a lot deeper. At the moment, we're not looking, we're not focusing a lot on the films, just on the box office. This is what's happening with the DCEU. People pick apart the DCEU because they're really, picking the movie apart. But it doesn't happen with the MCU. Try picking the MCU movies apart. It's not that difficult. You don't have to be an expert pundit. You don't have to be journalistically proficient. It's very easy to do. They're very, very ordinary, generic films that focus on the comedy rather than anything else. There's a lot of laughs in this film. But shouldn't this be a more somber film? Shouldn't this be a self-examination about Peter? Shouldn't Peter be thinking about Uncle Ben after he's lost Tony Stark? Now, people are saying we don't want to see that origin again. Listen, at the end of the day, I think Uncle Ben is too important to ignore. I think we at least deserve a flashback. The only good thing they've done is brought back J.K. Simmons as Jonah Jameson, right? Awesome, brilliant. And he's out, basically, spoilers here, but he's been outed. Spider-Man's been outed as Peter Parker. But going back to Uncle Ben is absolutely vital and important. They've got that element wrong. They've got the whole element of Aunt May wrong. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. Marissa Tomei is a bad fit. It's as simple as that. And you look at the whole thing. Where are the Osborns? There's no effort here. It's, right? So if we look at Mysterio, his whole kind of plan is centered around hating Tony Stark, a character who's dead now. But not only that, this is a Spider-Man movie. Come on, when does it get personal for Spider-Man? The most personal it gets is his grief for Tony Stark. And again, we've got Happy Hogan. All these films are about, both of them, are forwarding the MCU narrative. And this is what the problem is with the MCU. It's so scared to do anything different, to be brave, to do a standalone Spider-Man film. Yes, it's making the bacon, so Sony and Disney will be very happy, but ultimately cutting out Uncle Ben, a very important character in the comics. He took, Jeremy Conrad talks about the comics, but he's not talking about the full picture, is he? Because people defending something that's not working, that's been wrongly developed, try and pull the wool from your eyes, right? They try and cover up the problems. The problem is with Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home that they're just very generic, very simple movies that focus on comedy rather than drama. And that's a shame. And there's no consequences for Peter in this film. Absolutely no consequences. And ultimately, if we are going to start comparing the MCU Spider-Man with the Raimi Spider-Man is leaps and bounds ahead. Because, firstly, Raimi is a hardcore Spider-Man fan. Yes, I know there was no web blasters, but for fuck's sake, man, talk about nitpicking. We're talking about a Spider-Man that feels like Spider-Man. We're talking about a Peter Parker that feels like Peter Parker. And within these two films, because I don't want to talk about the third one because so many people hate it. I don't, but we won't go into that, right? We'll talk about the first two movies because they're the ones that I think two of the best CBMs you'll ever see. There's kind of this soapy element of the love story between MJ and Peter. And it's very cathartic. It's very emotional. It's very relatable for a lot of young people. That the love they have for each other and the obstacles in that relationship's way really works in such a deep level. I don't believe that in this MJ and this Peter Parker. I don't believe they're in love. It wasn't set up properly. It wasn't fleshed out properly in the first film. She is not MJ. She's not MJ. She doesn't even act like MJ, right? We all know that, but we've got to accept her as MJ in case we're accused of anything, right? The truth of the matter is that the MCU are not doing anything now. Each one of their films earns around $1 billion. You are making this company money to make you the same movie every time. Each movie is the same version of a different character. That's all you're doing. You're just re-watching the first Avengers movie, right? And ever since the success of Avengers, people talk about Warner Brothers being reactive, but Disney are really reactive too, in the sense of just doing the same things all the time. Oh, we must have an MCU character cameoing in the film. It's only when those things don't happen that the films actually work. So at the end of the day, for me, ignoring Uncle Ben is a travesty. John Watts, the director, is saying, well, we will reference him in the future. I'm sure we will. I don't want him referenced. He should be one of the most important figures in Peter's life because he helped bring him up. He's always been important. But because they decided not to mention him, just because they decided to do this Uncle Tony thing, which, to be honest with you, didn't even really work. I was never convinced of that dynamic between both those characters. I think they even messed that up. But for Jeremy Conrad to stand there and put down Raimi's Spider-Man to try and convince us that the MCU Spider-Man is a lot better, it's not. Tom Holland is not the best Spider-Man ever, right? The MCU Spider-Man is not the best Spider-Man ever. Tobey Maguire and Raimi's Spider-Man are the best live-action version of the character. Not just my opinion, that's a fact. There are a couple of films that will live in the memory for the rest of our lives, and where, the next generation will go and watch them and go, hang on a minute, this is pretty good. Why ain't they doing this? Eventually, people will wake up to Feige and what he's doing. And don't get me started on Professor Hulk, but Uncle Ben matters. Uncle Ben absolutely matters. And it's absolutely criminal that he's been ignored. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe.